Nobody believed in it. Nobody at Universal believed in it. You know, it was just, oh, he's just going to give us a kids and car movie for spring break. And I had a different mindset about what I was creating and just went after it relentlessly.
To any movie where you're trying to say, how can I bring the audience into a world even when they're not aware of it? Because in the end, hardware is great, action scenes are great, but the degree to which I can create empathy between you, the viewer, and these characters is the degree to which I feel the film will be successful and I will have done my best job.
For those 10 seconds or less, I'm free. Let's go for a little ride.
It's Toretto, Brian. It always has been Toretto.
So check it out, it's like this. This is your car.
My car?
There's all kinds of family, Brian.
I watched my dad burn to death.
That's a choice you're gonna have to make.
They banned me from the tracks for life.
But if I win, I take the cash and I take the respect.
Something about engines that calms me down.
To some people, that's more important.
I owe you a 10-second car.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time. For those 10 seconds or less, I'm free.
Hey everyone, my name's Noah and I'm here to share whether you care or not. Today I have a really special video that's been in the works for a long time. It's been on my mind for a long time. It's been a huge part of my life, what I'm going to talk about. It's had a big effect in my personal life, my personal hobbies. It obviously has something to do with my love for movies. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into this. But if you're a returning viewer and you're stopping by to check in, thanks for stopping by. It really means a lot to me. But if you're a first-time viewer and you're just first-time finding me, I also want to thank you for stopping by. It really means a lot to me, and I hope I can entertain and maybe you can learn something from this or just enjoy my ramblings. But yeah.
Toad and E minor.
Yeah, E minor, all right, yeah!
Today I want to talk about The Fast and the Furious from 2001. The film that got me into liking cars and helped light the automotive fire under me at a young age while still managing to bring me back all these years later. It's a film that has spawned a multi-billion-dollar franchise along with remaining as a celebrated landmark in the 2000s zeitgeist.
Oh, good. Why, that's very good. Yes, I like that.
What is even more crazy though is 2026 marks the 25th anniversary of this original film. That's just wild to me. So with that said, I want to talk about the film, the production, the sweet rides, deleted scenes, maybe some deeper analysis and other information that surrounds the film, maybe some like trivia and stuff like that. If you're not a fan of the original movies and just maybe a little more cars, because if you don't already know, I'm kind of a gearhead, this may not be the video for you, which is fine. It won't hurt my feelings if you're going to click off, but if you're still here and all this intrigues you, buckle up, it's gonna be a ride.
Let's go for a little ride.
The year is 2001. It was the dawn of a new century. Sony PlayStation 2s were the hot new gaming console. My dad had one. I grew up playing on one. It was awesome.
I'm here for the PlayStation 2. The best entertainment system to hit the world. It's gonna be great.
Limp Bizkit were at the height of their career. No social media existed. The first iPod was revealed this year, along with Wikipedia being created in 2001. Mere months before the 9/11 attacks that undoubtedly changed the world.
Plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that.
But on June 22nd, 2001, came a film that also changed the world. A film that nobody had faith in, not even the studio behind it, which is insane. Yes, I am still talking about The Fast and the Furious, that movie. It's a thrilling film exploring the underground world of street racing and elements of cops and robbers. The movie was directed by Rob Cohen, produced by Neil H. Moretz, written by a team of individuals including David Ayer. Yes, that David Ayer, which just blew my mind.
Best job I ever had. Best job I ever had.
Best job I ever had.
Starring a fresh group of young stars like Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Michelle Rodriguez, Jordana Brewster. Also the hip-hop megastar Ja Rule makes an appearance. And then the movie also includes a veteran face with Ted Levine to pad out the cast. And then there were the other actors in the film, the cars, the stars. Those stuff that us gearheads and even people who just can appreciate cars really remember about this movie. And of course I'm referring to the likes of the second generation Mitsubishi Eclipse, the Nissan Skyline GTR R33, 70 Dodge Charger, Mazda RX-7, and last but certainly not least, the Mark IV Toyota Supra. chef's kiss. I mean, that is my car. Like, that is our generation. That is like the dream car. Once we saw that smoke, the Ferrari, oh my God, the 2JZ, chef's kiss. Chef's freaking kiss. Paired with a unique soundtrack from electronic musician BT, along with rock and hip-hop tracks of the time, dynamic camera work, cutting-edge visual effects, and also a commitment to showcasing speed on screen, this film made a massive splash on not only the box office but the cultural zeitgeist of the 2000s, bleeding its way into new and existing facets of the turn of the millennium, spawning an entirely new generation of movie lovers along with gearheads wanting to have their own piece of the speed and adrenaline showcased on film.
Choose track.
Times Square.
Choose upgrade.
Smooth ride. Ready, set, go!
But before we dive into the movie, we need to start kind of from the beginning. Before it was this franchise, before they became superheroes and all this other stupid stuff, before all of that, you know, where did this come from? Well, let's talk about it. Rob Cohen. Rob Cohen, who directed The Fast and the Furious, is also known for the likes of 1996's Dragonheart. You might remember from 2002's Triple X that also stars Vin Diesel, 2005's Stealth, and even 2008's The Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Here we go again.
So the guy's been around for a long time, and he's made some now pretty remarkable films. Some may not be as good as others, but some still pop out in pop culture. But the film that I really find the most interesting in his body of work is it's not really The Fast and Furious. Like, it's my favorite film of his, but it's not really, I feel like, the most important. And let me explain what I mean there. It's in fact a film that came out just prior in the year 2000. It's called The Skulls. It's a movie following a group of young college men being sworn into a secret society. The film didn't have the biggest following or audience reviews and immediate cultural impact, but it unknowingly helped spawn The Fast and Furious, and undoubtedly the entire franchise that, like I said, has now made billions over its tenure. The movie starred Paul Walker and then Joshua Jackson from Dawson's Creek. I really enjoy it. It's kind of I don't want to say a guilty pleasure, but it's a pretty cool movie.
You better check his breathing. I don't know. Maybe he didn't react too well to the drugs.
Wow! Hey, Caleb, where can I get some more of that shit?
But how did a little movie like The Skulls help spawn The Fast and Furious? You know, you're like, no, what are you talking about? Well, let me explain real quick.
Let me tell you something, man.
The Skulls served as the first meeting point for three very important individuals, that being director Rob Cohen, producer Neil Moritz, and actor Paul Walker. Long story short, while finishing The Skulls, Moritz approached Walker and asked him what he wanted to do next. Paul expressed interest in portraying an undercover cop. Months later, Paul said he got a call from Neil proposing the idea of what would later become The Fast and the Furious. Moretz and Rob Cohen were inspired after reading an article in a 1998 issue of Vibe magazine entitled Racer X by journalist Ken Lee, who shed light on what was then modern-day underground street racing in the underbellies of New York.
There was a magazine article that Scott Stuber at Universal saw. They introduced me to the article, and I thought this was just a great opportunity to enter the whole subculture of these cars and people, and it was a great idea for a movie.
Cohen was signed on to direct the film, and Paul signed on to the project before a screenplay was even written, which was definitely a no-no. You don't sign on to a project in Hollywood without a script or a screenplay. That's usually a no-no. And Paul even said his management team or they were like, nah, don't do that, but he signed on anyways because he liked working with Rob and he liked the premise that was pitched to him. Paul loved the pitch of not only being a cop, but also getting hands-on with cars and the action. Rob Cohen would later express that him and Paul clicked on working on The Skulls, prompting a nice friendship and desire to work together again, which is kind of where this came from.
I feel like I really worked with a director that I really clicked with, and when I talk to my agent or I talk to my representatives back home, I think I say over and over again is that I either want to work with Rob again or I want to work with someone just like him.
Cohen admitted that initially he wasn't sure if Paul had what it took when he was casting for The Skulls. Although, after some advice and coaching from Cohen, Paul was able to come back and read for the part again, was able to impress him, and he landed the role of Caleb Mandrake in the film The Skulls. But later, during the production of The Fast and the Furious, it actually wasn't called this yet. The working titles were things like Racer X, a nod to the Vibe magazine article that inspired the movie. It was also called Race Wars, which was probably best that maybe they didn't stick with that because, obvious reasons it may not sound too good in some context. But also, it was actually Redline. I think this was the title that stuck for the longest, but ultimately wasn't, the final title. But Redline is the thing that I think most people saw a script for, and that was what it was titled for the majority of its production. As a matter of fact, there is a making of, like, behind the scenes video of this era in production that the film, you can still see it's labeled as Redline. It wasn't until later that Cohen and Moretz landed the name The Fast and the Furious after making a deal with filmmaker Roger Corman, who had directed the 1954 film with the same name. In exchange for them getting the name for this new movie, Corman was given access to a plethora of stock footage from Universal, so it was like a nice trade-off.
So I took the stock footage, all the big shots from Spartacus, went into the same sets where Spartacus was shot, and shot all my close-ups and medium shots and cut them together with the long shots for a picture called Cyclops, which I made for the Sci-Fi Channel. And I got a letter from Tom Vitale, the head of the Sci-Fi Channel, saying, "Cyclops is the biggest and best picture anybody has ever made for sci-fi, courtesy of The Fast and the Furious."
Hi, this is Ellen with Hollywood.com here at the Man Village Westwood. Tonight is the premiere for The Fast and the Furious.
The Fast and the Furious released on June 22nd, 2001, and like I mentioned before, Universal seemingly had little hopes for this movie or it having any success. Instead, they put more of a focus on pushing the Josie and the Pussycats film that released in April 2001. To their surprise, the opposite happened. The Fast and the Furious became a domestic and international phenomenon. Only costing $38 million to produce, the film grossed over $207 million worldwide. Meanwhile, Josie and the Pussycats raked in just under like $15 million at the box office, after costing a whopping, like reported, $22 million to make.
We're special. Yeah, special ed.
So it was a flop. The film Universal had faith in bombed, while the other that they doubted soared and eventually became their biggest success to this day. This was the start of everything, spawning what we now know as this big franchise. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves and bring up the utter insanity that it became with science fiction and superheroes. Let's not do any of that. Let's just stay in 2001 if that's okay with everybody, which if you're watching at this point, you're probably in agreement. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm a massive fan of this first movie. It's the best in the series. I mean, I will stand by that. I'll die by that. It's the best one. What's funny to me is that there are people out there who only started liking them around the turning point of Fast 5, which is understandable. It's a fantastic film, don't get me wrong. But it still just isn't this one. I think for those of us who are fascinated by the car culture and general atmosphere of the first few films, are the only ones who say that they are the best of the series. You generally have the half who enjoys the street racing and cars, while the other half enjoys the later films for the insane action and increasingly questionable logic. With that said, there are leaps in logic in every film, let's not get that twisted, but I still think the first one is the most grounded and is the best film of the bunch. With that said, let's dive a little deeper and let's get into the movie itself. So we are all pretty familiar with the film and its story, cars, and overall vibes if you're like me and grew up with it, or you've just watched it a million times like me. Undercover cop Brian O'Connor is sent to uncover an illegal electronic goods operation among a backdrop full of street racing and colorful personalities and cars. Often, the film is compared and accused of ripping off Point Break, which is fair. Like the affair of Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze, it focuses on a cop who loses sight of the original mission with Paul Walker when they are adopted and find a liking for the very criminals they are meant to detain, with Vin Diesel and his crew. Even director Rob Cohen admitted that this was in his mind during production, but didn't think that drawing inspiration for Point Break was such a bad thing. And you know what? He's absolutely right. How is that a bad thing? The Fast and the Furious is very kinetic and full of life, perfectly capturing the craze that was the Japanese cars and street racing culture in the early 2000s. It's the perfect time capsule movie. Now when I say that, I mean like how Ferris Bueller for like Back to the Future for my parents are a perfect time capsule for the 80s. You know, that a certain time, just like American Graffiti was a perfect time capsule for the era that it came out in. And I think of like the Fast and the Furious and like the first Spider-Man and X-Men. They're kind of this perfect little capsule showing what the world was like around the turn of the century. Sure, we all know the movie can be very cheesy at times, along with cringy car lingo that us gearheads know is absolutely wrong.
Third.
I told you it was third.
That lengthen the injected pulse. Another millisecond, just tune the NOS timer, you'll run 9.
I need NOS. My car topped out at 140 miles per hour this morning.
Amateurs don't use nitrous oxide.
But this first film does something that the other films only attempt to do as good as this one does. It's the very thing that has kept me returning to the film, along with why it's continued to stay alive in the minds and hearts of those who watched it and still celebrate it a quarter of a century later. What am I talking about? It's simple. This film explores what it means to find belonging among different worlds colliding. I know this may sound overly gracious and analytical in regards to what most might consider a B-movie, that on the surface seems just very loud and flashy, but unlike some of the other entries in the franchise, time has been nothing but kind to this movie in a different way. At a young age, I was drawn to the cars and visuals of speed, but as I aged and began going on my own journey of being a car enthusiast and just growing up, something clicked and became more obvious with this film. This film meant something more to me, something different to me now on rewatch. Like Brian, I once found myself exploring new territory and ultimately finding belonging in circumstances that seemed kind of unusual. No, I wasn't an undercover cop who had a moral crisis, but I was once a kid who found belonging amongst people who could speak the same language as I, and that really being wrapped around in mostly cars. Those people I became good friends with, learned with, and ultimately felt like my own family, creating a unique bond. No different than Brian finding family among people he underestimated and creating a bond and finding purpose that surpassed any sworn orders he'd taken as an officer. It might be a story that has been told over and over again, but I still find it fascinating. How the cop finds belonging and purpose not in his pseudo-family of brothers and sisters who wear the same badge as he does, but in the very criminals he's sworn to arrest because of how they've treated him. What made this movie and the subsequent sequels special was this bond/chemistry between people, specifically Dom and Brian. Even when the flashy cars and neon was gone, this was what still felt charming in the later films that at least Paul Walker was a part of. And I think that's something that they've kind of lost forward of Furious 7, and they kind of lost, honestly, after the first couple, is that kind of like me and bro kind of mentality and us just working on cars and bonding. They kind of lost that. So now let's talk a little bit more about some of the nitty gritty, some things that I'd like to talk more about, and let's talk about like the film look, the cinematography, and some of the camera work that's done in the movie. First, we really have to talk about the look of this film. Why don't movies look like this anymore? Man, I really miss this style. Definitely reminds me a lot of like Michael Bay's first Bad Boys film in like the general appearance. To explain what I'm talking about, I love the deep saturated colors in the movie. It's a warm color palette giving everything that nice golden/orange that's easy on the eyes. This look was achieved by using tobacco filters among other techniques from what I could understand. This really sells that feeling and look of a warm and hot summer in Southern California. In Rob Cohen's words, this pushed the saturation of colors beyond the normal ways of filmmaking, and I think this style is held up and will always stand out among the group. This also allows the other stars of the movie to stand out too, that being the cars. I mean, just look at the Supra, I mean, my God. Furthermore, the production and crew made the decision to find less colorful locations to shoot in, along with asking some homeowners for permission to repaint their houses in duller colors, all for the sole purpose of what Rob called keeping the world visually muted. So the cars that were much more vibrant already, they popped that much more on screen. It's the little things like this and the thought process that makes me respect this film so much, but also Rob as a director. Neither are probably really credited as much as they should be, but I always like the thought process that at least Rob Cohen and some of these others brought into, you know, what's otherwise could be overlooked. I kind of like that. Besides the colors, the film also has that old style grain, which is undoubtedly because it was shot on real film and not digital. Like my comparison with Bad Boys, but not just exclusive to that, movies just looked so much better before everything went to digital. Digital was nearly too clean of a look, and it just doesn't have that same grit of these older flicks. While listening to the director's commentary, he expressed a desire to keep the camera moving and make even the most expository scenes, or maybe more boring scenes, interesting to the viewer. And he kind of mentions that he wants to move the camera almost like everything's a race. It's always moving. It's very kinetic. With this technique, it gives the film this subconscious kinetic energy that may not be obvious at first, but once you notice this, you won't ever unsee it. I definitely love just how creative some of these shots are too. I mean, look at this awesome night to day transition in the opening of the film. Something funny I actually never noticed, you can actually see him pulling up in the Dodger Stadium parking lot. Speaking of this transition, we also get another time lapse or transition later in the film with the Hollywood estate that the cops are operating out of. Let's also not forget the iconic shots of some of the stereo equipment thumping and enhanced views into the transmission, turbos, and nitrous equipment in action. I love the way all this is shot. It's kind of goofy, and some of it's kind of a little implausible, but I love like just how cool this looks. And even though it's all digital, how hats off to him. I mean, it looks good, and this movie came out 25 years ago now, and it still holds up. It looks great. Sure, some of the nitrous, their warp speed looks a little goofy, but honestly, I can roll with it. It's fun. It's never bothered me. A small detail I took note of was Rob mentioning in his commentary later about he wanted to have this shot peering through the window of Brian and Mia to give a nod to artist Edward Hopper. I'm not personally familiar with the artist, but I can kind of see the comparison. Speaking more of the shoot and maybe where they decide to point the camera, there are so many cool locations and shots that are captured in the movie. Everything from urban LA neighborhoods to busy streets, mountain ranges, Hollywood properties, and my favorite being the abandoned military airstrip where racehorses being held. I've talked about the flashy locations and camera work, but what Cohen decided to do with certain scenes make them stand out even more. By that, remember how I was saying that the camera is very kinetic, it's moving all the time? When the camera decides to stop moving as fast or it decides to stay a little more static, I think it's very intentional and it kind of makes those scenes stand out more. There are a few moments in the film where the camera becomes more static and up close with our characters, and for good reason. A few of my prime examples are scenes such as Ted Levine's Sergeant Tanner having kind of an off-the-record heart-to-heart with Brian. This scene is very calm in nature but shares a lot in not only Brian's headspace at this time, but also his sergeant's kind of paternal-like care for Brian as a cop and a person. He admits that he knows Brian is deeper with and knows more about Toretto than he lets on with everybody else, but he's not an idiot. He basically just tells Brian, hey man, you need to choose which side of the aisle you're going to be on. Again, it's kind of a small scene, but I love the music behind it, the camera work, and Ted Levine and Paul Walker, they do a good job in this scene, and I feel like this is the scene where Ted Levine gets to stretch a little bit of his acting muscles.
There's all kinds of family, Brian, and that's a choice you're going to have to make.
And then, to oppose that, you've got a scene where Brian and Dom are confronting each other at the house. Jesse shows back up and the camera kind of has this really cool push and pull that I really like. It's kind of the opposite of being static. To kind of showcase my favorite bit of the movie that showcases the more static and slow camera work and that kind of comes up close to their characters is the best scene in the film. And that, of course, is a scene involving Dom talking to Brian in the garage about his charger, his dad, his mistakes, and his philosophy that defined his character and motivations. Maybe I'm just looking into this a little deeper than most, but it's quite frankly the best scene in the film. In my opinion, it's the single best piece of acting Vin Diesel or Paul Walker has ever given in either of their careers. Here we learn everything that this film and this character of Dominic Toretto is about. This is the character at his best, which is never seen again, unfortunately. But here, he drops his otherwise impenetrable persona and becomes vulnerable to his newfound brother in Brian, showing, in Rob Cohen's words, immense remorse for his actions that define the rest of his life. And another fascinating element or discovery in this scene is not only found by the audience, but also by Brian too. Think about it. Brian and the viewers have been told about Dom being violent and crazy for the activities he participated in, along with nearly beating a guy to death. But here, all is truly revealed, and that point of view is shifted. I love what this scene accomplishes not only on a narrative front, but for also the characters and for the viewer. Besides the camera work and impressive acting, what makes this scene nearly perfect in my mind is also the haunting score by BT that creeps in slowly and helps send shivers down your spine while Dom relives his dad's death while Brian is just speechless.
The people that were there said that he had died before the tanks blew. They said it was me who was screaming.
Brian doesn't say a single word. After they first step in, he asks Dom, why hasn't he driven the Charger?
I've never driven her.
Why not?
Scares the shit out of me.
Brian doesn't speak another word in the rest of the scene, which is kind of interesting. I love this scene. It kind of helps sell what otherwise might be a cheesy one-liner. In most films, kind of a catharsis, and also kind of expressing the entire theme of the story in this film. That being, everyone is chasing and relishing in this 10-second window where everything else fades and something finally makes sense. 10 seconds to escape the world that is otherwise closing in on them. In Dom's case, it's all of that. He truly survives and thrives on that 10-second window, 1/4 mile at a time. And it's not a far stretch to think that these other characters are in a similar headspace. They race and love to have that 10-second window where nothing else matters to them either. And I think what's perfectly portrayed in this first movie is that Brian gets a taste of that. And I think it obviously influences where his character goes in the rest of the series too. And this also affects his decision in the end of this movie. What's insane to me though is, according to Rob Cohen, this actual scene in the garage was threatened to be cut several times, but Rob continued to fight for it. Rob calls it the most pivotal scene in the film, and you know what? he's right. It's kind of I don't want to say it's the climax, but it's a super, super important part of the movie as far as the film. Dom's character, we know everything we need to know about him in that moment. And then we also learn a lot about Brian too, even though he barely says anything. I think that's fascinating. But to kind of pivot a little bit, let's talk a little bit more about like the visual effects and the stunt work and things like that. Although there is CGI and digital effects in the film, there is a strong commitment to doing practical effects and just generally high quality stunts. Furthermore, let's shed some light on the great stunt work. The stunt coordinator Mick Rogers had an ingenious idea for shots involving actors driving up close to look real, but taking out any risk on the actor's behalf, like they won't be doing any driving. This is where the Mick rig was created. It's basically a truck chassis that has a car shell of the car that the actors are supposed to be in on camera, and it's attached to the bed of the truck. That way they could strap the actor in this car shell and pretend to drive on camera while the stunt driver is up front actually piloting the vehicle. With proper camera techniques and editing, it's seamless, and it's hard to distinguish any difference. Besides the Mick rig and the car stunts, there are fantastic stunts all around. Everything looks good. The hand-to-hand, everything they do, it looks really good. So let's talk about the soundtrack, because this is really something I kind of want to talk more about. Obviously, this film was packed full of big artists such as Ja Rule, who was even given a role in the film as Edwin. He provided classic songs like Life Ain't a Game and Furious, and was featured on Race Against Time alongside Tank. There was also other R&B / hip hop artists like R. Kelly, Fat Joe, and Ashanti, but they also include the likes of modern nu metal and rock, with Limp Bizkit's Rollin' Rollin', Saliva's two awesome tracks Click Click Boom and Superstar, and Dope's song Debonair, to just name a few. Awesome and appropriate music choices for that time.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear God. It's beautiful.
But what I appreciate now more than ever is the actual score that was composed and created by the famous electronic artist BT. Director Rob Cohen said he wanted a particular flavor in this film and wanted no one other than BT to do the film. This wouldn't be the only collaboration between BT and Cohen. A few years later in 2005, BT would also come back and score Rob's other film called Stealth. Anyways, BT obviously agreed to score The Fast and the Furious, and he ended up crafting one of the most unique soundtracks I've ever heard. With classic orchestral numbers to head-pumping rave music, it all manages to fit and belong in the film, and strengthen it. What's more unfortunate, though, is the fact that the majority of his score was never released separately. Alright, I'm going to stop myself right there. So in my original notes and kind of making of this video, his score wasn't released, just like I just mentioned, but as of, honestly, just a week or so ago, at the time of this recording, he's actually released his score for the movie. It's on all digital streaming platforms, which is great. That's a huge win. There are a couple songs from his original score that are included on the more Fast and Furious soundtrack of the film, which I actually have, but that's pretty much it. It's not really the full score, it's just a couple tracks. I want to talk more about how they kind of went and made the score, but instead of me paraphrasing, kind of butchering it, how about I just let BT explain how he himself created the score. Not long ago, he actually shared a video talking about how he did this and kind of what went into it. And I thought this was super fascinating because it was just really never known before. There's not any coverage on it. So without me paraphrasing it, I just want to include it in this video and you can hear it for yourselves. Here you go.
Here's a story you may never have heard from the Fast and Furious. So, of course, the Fast and Furious, this really was my first big orchestral score where I wrote for full orchestra, scored the full film, got to go to the set. And here's the cool story. So when I saw the rough cut of this film, which was called Redline, not a lot of people know that. When I saw the rough cut of this film, the studio said, this is terrible. No one's going to go watch this, right? And I met with Rob Cohen, the director, who is just an amazing, amazing filmmaker. And Rob said, you know, I want to make this movie about illegal street racing, and you're the only person that I want to score it. And I was very flattered. And we talked a lot about it. And I said, here's the catch, okay? I'm going to want to do something with the physical cars themselves. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, let me watch it first, and then I'll tell you. So we had a pre-screening. And in the pre-screening, the parking lot was filled with rice rockets. People had like UFO lights on their cars. were burning out. There were like people breakdancing in the parking lot. It was total mayhem. And the film screened 100. Okay. The studio actually did not believe that somehow the numbers weren't played around with. So they made us rescreen the film. We screened it 3 times. All 3 times it scored 100, 199. And they were like, wait a second, maybe this movie doesn't suck as bad as we thought it did. Of course, now it's become this incredible franchise. When I watched that film for the first time, I said to Rob, these guys and girls are like cowboys. And I said, I want to use some very interesting instruments with it, like the bansuri, which is an Indian flute. I want to use pedal steel guitars, kind of, you know, mimic the sound of quite literal, like Appalachia kind of, you know, cowboy sort of stuff. And finally, I said, I want to give the sound of motion and movement using car parts. And he's like, what do you need? And I was like, I need some car wrecks. So they delivered to me 3 full car wrecks from the set of the Fast and Furious to the studio. And then I had 2 orchestral percussionists and notated on orchestral percussion staffs parts for the cars, the hoods, the brakes, the doors, everything. So everything you hear in this film that's percussion is a car part from one of the wrecks.
You break your heart, I'll break your neck.
So now let's talk a little bit more about the faces of the film, the actors. Paul Walker obviously stars as now the iconic Brian O'Connor. He had starred in other movies prior, but this one obviously put him on the map and also seemingly got him more interested in JDM cars. Although he had expressed that he previously had interest in automotive things, he loved cars because of his grandpa, he's always been into cars, but I think this movie kind of helped propel him to a whole nother level of being a gearhead. So it's interesting. I think his real life mirrors the character of Brian quite nicely. Watching someone who is undoubtedly falling in love with the world of cars and street racing, getting a high off of it, while also developing honor amongst his fellow brothers and sisters who have the same craft. Just like I mentioned before, he kind of got an elevated sense of a high, you know, for liking the Japanese stuff and cars in a different way now. I think that's kind of interesting. It mirrors his character in a certain way. Next, we have Vin Diesel as the one and only Dominic Toretto. Vin was fairly unknown at the time, but he had some impressive credits under his belt. I appreciate the way Coen explains the magic of Dom as a character in the film. For someone who appears as a brute, him and Diesel try to subvert the expectations and the looks of the character by allowing him to display his sharp intelligence and awareness for his surroundings, which I think we see that throughout the film. Speaking of Dom, Rob purposely decided to introduce his character kind of behind a fence or a wall. We're not getting a full picture of him to kind of help keep him more mysterious. I think it's interesting how we find Brian and Dom this way at the beginning of the film at such a distance with a wall between them, but by the time you get to the end, they're an arm's length right next to each other. I think it's a nice contrast that they're on different sides of the fence, per se, and then at the end of the movie, they are on the same side. I think that's kind of cool. Speaking more about the others, both Michelle Rodriguez, who plays Letty, and Jordana Brewster, who plays Mia, were actually really young when they got hired, and neither one of them even had their driver's licenses when they got onto the movie. We also had the likes of Matt Schultz as Vince, who I now recognize from his small role in Blade 2. I thought I recognized him from somewhere. We also have Chad Lindbergh as Jesse, Johnny Strong as Leon, Rick Yoon as Johnny Tran, Noel G as Hector, Reggie Lee as Tran's cousin Lance, with the snakeskin pants, as we all remember. Ted Levine as Sergeant Tanner, Buffalo Bill for those of you who are unfamiliar, and he also played Rusty Nail. He was the voice of Rusty Nail in Joyride, which also came out in 2001 and starred Paul Walker, so they both had another movie they were in the same year. I thought that was kind of cool. And we also have Tom Berry as Bilkins.
Hey, you know what? Why don't you send the bill to Johnny Trent?
Brian, are the kids giving me attitude?
Also notable smaller appearances are from the production technical advisors who helped with the vehicles, parts, and other relations with vehicle matters. These 2 men were RJ DeVera, who appeared in the first race driving the Civic, and also Craig Lieberman, who is the race flagger at Race Wars. RJ was well known at the time for being plugged into the automotive scene as an editor for Super Street magazine, and would later become the vice president of marketing for SEMA, which is kind of cool. But he's undoubtedly best known for the guy playing Gran Turismo in his Civic before the first big race. As far as Craig goes, he was also a very well-respected member of the car culture, but perhaps not as large as he would indefinitely become now. Craig even later wrote a book called Crashing Cars, detailing his time in the early days of Fast and Furious. I actually have this book and I've read it. It's pretty cool. Craig also has a YouTube channel talking about the production of not only the first, but the second film as well, along with the cars that they used and other behind-the-scenes information that you may not have known. If you haven't come across this, or if you've maybe skimmed across it, check Craig's channel out. He is awesome. He tells a lot of good stories. He's got a lot of really good insight about the cars from the first 2 movies. And he's even done his research on other cars in the movies, which I think is awesome. But like I said, if you haven't checked out his channel, please check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. You can check it out after you watch this video. With that said, Craig has a special tie to the franchise simply because not only did he serve as a technical advisor for the first 2 films and appearing in the first, but he also provided a few of his personal cars that became icons on screen. One of the cars including Vince's Blue Maxima, which was in fact really supercharged. And instead of a 3000 GT for Vince, like they kind of wanted, Universal actually rented the Maxima from Craig and just used it for Vince's car in the movie. They slapped graphics on it and made it look a certain way, but yeah, that was his car, which I think is so funny, a Nissan Maxima. That's how it came to be. Because they didn't have enough money for the 3000 GTs. I think that's hilarious. But it didn't stop there. This is not the only vehicle of Craig's that was included in the first film. He was the owner of the Toyota Supra. Pretty crazy, right? This car is the reason that he started working with Universal. This Supra was popular among local car events before the movie, winning awards for its good looks while also packing some punch under the hood. This car got the attention of David Martyr, an employee of Universal who was just roaming around at these car meets and actually ended up asking Craig to read a newly developed script for a film called Redline and to kind of give some feedback. This ended up snowballing into Craig being invited to the Universal Pictures studio lot, where he was introduced to Rob Cohen and Universal executives, along with the presence of Paul Walker and Vin Diesel, who was there on the lot that day. Craig showed off the Supra to them and actually ended up taking director Rob for a ride, where he immediately wanted the Supra for the movie, no questions. The car was then repainted and got a new cosmetic makeover, and that's how it became an icon, with these nuclear gladiator graphics and the way it looks. That was all the art department. Craig's car was originally yellow, like I'm showing right now. It went over a whole new makeover. But anyways, that's just a little tidbit about, so again, some more appearances in the movie and a little bit more about the tech advisors and kind of their impact on the movie, which I think is cool. And now I'm going to go back and talk a little bit more about some more analysis and maybe some other things I noticed thinking about watching the movie again. Sure, it's regarded as ripping off Point Break, like I mentioned before, but I think it does enough different with its backdrop that it never really mattered. Rob Cohen stated that the film isn't a racing film nor a crime film. He said something kind of very interesting. He calls it a lifestyle film, which, you know, honestly I think kind of makes more sense. He then uses the elements of racing and crime as just flavors in the narrative to help give it the meat on top of those bones. Although we all know now, I love the setup of the events of how we learn throughout the runtime of the movie. The way it's set up, the way the plot's presented to us. Initially, we think of Brian Earl Spillner as no more than a hot-headed novice trying to fit in with the street racing crowd. Then, not long after it's revealed his true occupation, an undercover cop by the real name of Brian O'Connor. However, our first impression of Brian is still true, even after we realize who he really is. He's still an eager novice who loves the thrill of speed, especially after that first race. And something I really love is Rob Cohen's explanation of the significance of that race. Not only is it to show the cars and show Dom's presence in the racing world and all this stuff, but obviously it is of big importance to the character of Brian. Rob states in his commentary that in a matter of 10 seconds, Brian has changed fundamentally. Before that 10 seconds, he was one person, and after, he's another. Despite losing, he's hooked into something that will eventually cause issues for him later though. What's funny though is even Cohen admits that despite the first race taking 10 seconds or less, you know, like a normal drag race with 10-second cars, even he admits that it's a little goofy that the scene is like over 2 minutes. But it has to be dramatized for the film's sake. Even he realized that, but I love how even he commented on that, because that's something that like me and my dad and me and other people have talked about, like, why is a 10-second race taking over 2 minutes? It's funny, but it's just for movie purposes. But anyways, the film is really neat with how it explores Brian hunting for leads while also kind of being with Dom and them, making him suspicious of different faces he meets among the street racing crowd too. The only problem is not one person fits the mold. Tran looks kind of suspicious in one way, while Hector raises red flags in another way. And of course, later in the film, there's strong reason to believe that the real perps are the ones he's befriended, making it very hard to believe and face for O'Connor. Brian obviously has a moral crisis in deciding to pursue Toretto until tensions boil and the audience is shown for 100% sure that Dom and the team are the true villains of the story. By this point in the film, we are fully invested in all of them, and it's a super cool dynamic knowing Brian not only has a job to do, but he's also trying to help his new friends even though they are the villains of the story. Obviously Brian later blows his cover after the final heist goes wrong. As Rob Cohen states, it's karma finally coming back to knock on the door of our villains. I love this motif, this idea idea because, you know, the first half of the film we see Dom as this unmovable force. Everything goes well for him. He's a force of nature. And then the latter half of the film we actually see Dom make true mistakes and suffer some consequences, which I think is really interesting. But speaking more about Brian and this kind of twist of events at the end, I love the awkward and impossible situation that Brian is put in to reveal his true identity to Dom. It was smart on the creative's behalf to show Brian's willingness to save the one person who's hated him and has shown nothing but aggression towards him the whole time, which is Vince. And now Vince's life is in his hands, and Brian makes the ultimate compassionate play to save Vince at the cost of his safety net with Dom and showing his true colors. This eventually leads to the finale where we get the infamous race. This brings us to one of my favorite endings in cinema, Brian choosing family over duty. He gives Dom the keys to the Supra and lets him escape. The final shot focusing on Brian walking away a new man. What's always stuck out to me is the order of events that we learn Dom and the team are the true villains. But obviously this is only after we really get invested to him and we have a lot of time with him that we actually fully learn, just like I mentioned before. It's one of the first times I remember watching a movie at a young age and rooted for the bad guys, which was and still is so strange, but it's kind of potent. And thankfully the movie never backs down on them being the criminals and the villains, but instead makes it kind of like a morally gray area for you, like Brian, to kind of navigate and to kind of make up your own mind about what they're doing. It's no different than the cops telling Brian that Dom is violent and he's done all these things and to be careful of him, but then we're also afforded the opportunity to hear Dom's point of view, and it doesn't sound that bad. That's one thing I think Rob Cohen and them do a great job of portraying is you know that these people are in the wrong or that they've done things from this perspective, but then you see it from another perspective. I like that. That's kind of neat. But let's talk a little bit more about the ending. The camera work is both off the rails and ferocious, but it's also kind of clear, while also selling a sense of jeopardy and speed that's different from the other racing segments of the film so far. Just when they take off, they do their race, and they clear the train, we also get this really cool twist of events where the Charger crashes into a semi, and it sends it into a spiral in the air, and it pulls off this spectacular stunt. Like I mentioned before, this feels like a natural call of karma back on Dom yet again. And through the climax and closing moments of the film, we see Dom's luck, like I mentioned before, his good fortune kind of run out, and he has to face his new reality, and he's fearful of it. Rightfully so. I think more or less I love what Rob had to say about the ending of the film. Feeling it was slightly controversial and unconventional, encouraging the viewer's imagination to ponder, what would Brian tell his fellow officers? Where did Dom go? Is Jesse dead? Where did the rest of the crew end up? Did Vince survive and keep his arm? All these good questions that I feel like were left ambiguous on purpose. And obviously Rob had no idea that this would be turned into a franchise at the time of his director's commentary. You know, he just focused on making a good standalone film that never needed to answer these questions. Or did it? What if I told you that one of these questions was answered in the film after the credits roll? You're like, no, what are you talking about? For years I had no idea that this film had a post-credits scene, and it actually features Dom living out in Baja, Mexico, driving a slick red Chevelle. Besides the scenery and roar of that V8, we only get one sentence of dialogue. It's a pretty short scene. It's the repeated line from earlier in the film.
I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
Although we now know where Dom is and it kind of answers that question we had whenever the credits initially rolled, I still feel like it's a nice conclusion to the film and we don't need anything more. And it nicely kind of closes the book on the story. Even though we know that there's sequels that will come after and blah, 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 this movie still has a great ability to have an ending and feels kind of finite.
You know what you're doing?
I owe you a 10-second car.
But now that I've talked kind of about the movie and kind of jumping around different ways, I kind of want to talk about some other things. Like, let's talk about some deleted scenes and alternate scenes, because some of these are pretty interesting. If I had to pick at something, though, I sometimes feel that the final cut of the film is missing a couple key deleted scenes that aren't in the movie that honestly could have helped further develop the characters and maybe some of the plot. For example, we all know Vince is super suspicious of Brian and also jealous due to Mia's attention being on Brian and not him. Vince comes off as childish and often impulsive, and he hates Brian. We all know that. And for good reason. We believe Brian shares some disliking for Vince too, though. Vince is obviously the first one that smells him out as being a cop, and he was right the whole time. However, there's one deleted scene that changes this entire dynamic. It's an alternate/deleted scene during the barbecue with the crew. You know, the one where Jesse says the prayer. We all know that scene.
Coming from the hospital, Vince?
Yeah.
How's your mother doing?
They're giving a shit for the pain.
What are they giving her?
Something I can't pronounce.
Let's make sure we put a plate of food together, save something for her. Tell her we all said hello.
She'd appreciate that.
Hey, Jesse, hand
Let's
me
eat
that
some
chicken.
grub, man.
Yeah.
Want some of that chicken?
So what's on your mind, Speed Racer? What are you thinking about?
Nothing.
You're in deep thought over there.
Oh. I just think this is nice.
What's nice?
All of this. You know, the picnic and the barbecue. It's like a family.
What are you, an orphan?
No, it's just whenever I show up, my dad always calls the cops.
That's funny. No cops at the Toretto's house. Rule number 1.
No pigs, no pigs.
Oink for you, man.
Now, why did they cut this? Like, genuinely, why did they cut this? Now, I know people will say, well, it's for pacing, or well, it's for this, or for that. No, seriously, why did they cut this? I'm going to state my case right now of why they should have kept it. And I even think Rob Cohen said he found merit in this scene too. Honestly, it helps ground and humanize Vince more than anything, who otherwise comes off as just a jerk the whole film, and he's just cold otherwise. It helps humanize all of them, honestly, especially talking about making a plate of food for Vince's sick mom. And I really love the look on Brian's face. It appears like he almost feels bad for Vince. It reshapes their entire relationship as one-sided. Brian doesn't really hold any hard feelings. It's just Vince. And the cherry on top of all of this is Brian being the first character to refer to them as family. I also like the jab and joke of the no cost being like the Toretto house. It's kind of a funny line. But I do love what this scene offers, where we do get more insight about Vince. And also I kind of feel like it might make the ending of the movie a little better with why Brian decides to hop out and help Vince. I still think it works without this scene because Brian is invested into the crew and the family, and he'll help Vince anyways. But I like what this scene kind of offers. Now, no longer than what it is, I kind of hate that it's not there, and maybe it is for pacing or whatever, but I think it's a good scene. But it doesn't just stop there. There are more deleted scenes that help flesh out the characters. For example, there's a couple scenes involving like Brian and Jesse, or Brian and the rest of the guys talking and bonding while they're building the Supra. I also appreciate and wish the scene between the guys had made it to the final cut. We learn more about Jesse, and especially Leon, who was left with practically nothing in the final cut of the film. And also we get some nice background on Brian, which is also absent in the final film, but I love this scene.
I was like 5 years old while I'm sitting on my father's lap. And it's got me propped up and both my hands are on the steering wheel. And it kept going faster and faster. I remember hearing him laughing. The faster we went, the happier he was.
How old were you again?
5.
My mom taught me how to drive.
Your mom?
Yeah, man. I was right before she left, though. You know, hate her for that, but I can't hate her completely, you know?
First time I drove was with my learner's permit. And we were on the 40 freeways, my mother and I. The car in front of me locks up its brakes. And then, boom! Someone blew into me from behind. 5-car pileup. First time I drove.
Before my dad went away, bought me this 71 Malibu Classic. First day I got my license. It's the greatest day. It's also the first day that I had sex. I shit you not.
Something about learning how to drive. Well, you're a driver or you're not a driver. So up until the point you start driving is one lifetime, and then after you start driving is another lifetime.
But I understand why it was cut. For pacing, it slows down. But even Rob Cohen says he loves that line that Vin gives about there being one lifetime before driving, and then after driving is another lifetime.
There was one scene in particular that I loved that the audience didn't want to sit through and the studio didn't like, but I loved. I had all the guys, they were building the Supra, all the men in the movie. And they all were there with their shirts off, and they were eating lunch, sitting on the half-finished car. And they were all talking about why they liked to drive and what was their first experience driving. And it was really wonderful because it was an improvised scene. It wasn't scripted. And Vin came up and he said this wonderful thing. He said, you have 2 lives as a man. You have before you learn how to drive, and then after you learn how to drive. Because once you learn how to drive, your life changes and you're never the same person again. And I love that statement because it's true. Once you get that freedom
to get in a car and go someplace. You're not with your parents, you're not dependent on anybody. Your life changes and your idea of yourself changes. And that's part of the reason I think people love cars all over the world. It's a symbol of true freedom.
And lastly, I want to talk about the alternate ending to the film. It's pretty dang wild. So the scene follows up Brian letting Dom go.
Okay, here you go. You have a good one.
Thank you. So where are you moving to?
Away.
Have you heard from Dom? You wouldn't tell me if you had.
No. What are you doing here? I thought your job was done. Officer.
Well, actually, I'm not a cop anymore. I quit, and they let me go quietly.
So what do you want?
What do I want? I want another chance. With you.
It's not gonna be that easy.
I've got time.
This definitely would have been a strange ending knowing what we ended up with. I like the idea of Brian choosing to pursue a new life, but we kind of already get that with the original ending, except it's more poetic and powerful by ending exactly where it did. Instead of kind of ending on more of a, not really a somber note, but more of a calm note between him and Mia, talking about how they want to kind of start fresh again. I love ending instead on that high note of Brian letting Dom go, because Dom takes the car and goes, and then Brian has this new sense of freedom. He's a new man. And we get to see the credits roll on him accepting that fate and that new reality. I love that ending. It's a lot more potent, and you're honestly ending on more of a high. I know why they cut it. I just thought it was cool to mention. So now let's talk about the cars. Something I'm kind of excited to kind of talk a little bit more about, because I love cars. And I'm sure if you're watching this, you might love them too.
What it's gonna do is it's gonna spool up really quick.
I have to set up for 2014.
Man, this movie has quite the selection and has something for, I think, about everybody. Whether it's Brian's Ford Lightning that is just his work truck, the Supra, or the beast that was the 70 Charger. Even though there is some absolutely wrong and nonsensical car terminology and things we've seen on screen, it's charming and most of it's cool enough to get a pass for most. Those same cringeworthy lines and mistakes have become part of its legacy, and these other mistakes, such as the danger to manifold, the floor pan magically coming loose from his eclipse over the increase in speed. I can't help but laugh when I see the nuts and bolts fly off, because it's like they're being removed by a NASCAR pit crew. That's hilarious to me. Another glaring issue is the way that they treat nitrous oxide. Not so much the hyper speed visuals like I mentioned before, I don't really mind that. I'm referring to the flammable properties they make up for the film. Nitrous oxide is quite the opposite of flammable, but I digress. But let's not forget the holy grail of them all. Dom's Charger hooking so hard off the line to do a wheelie, but the tires are still being lit up at the same time. It's been talked about to death, but I still can't not mention it. Obviously, with a tire sticky enough to help pull the front end off the ground, it's impossible for it to also be lacking traction and lighting up the tires. It's hilarious, but it's iconic now. Something else I've always found funny was the sound engineers who dubbed a mix of 2JZ and 1JZ and like other engine noises over the sound of Dom's RX-7. Most of us know that the RX-7 has its famous high revving rotary motor, sounding nothing like an inline 6 obviously. But these guys, along with the writers and art department, were not really car people, so this really wasn't a concern to them. So that's why we see and hear some otherwise questionable things. However, I will have to give them props for recording and using real sounds from the Supra that you see in the film. Craig's car was equipped with a laundry list of mods, but most importantly include a T66 single turbo conversion with a Greddy intake and exhaust system that helped achieve that unique sound of all 550 plus horses that his Supra had under the hood at that time. So what you hear is the real car as it was for the most part. And this is also the same for Vince's Maxima. I think they more or less just recorded the car as it was, which the other cars were later in post-production kind of given their sounds that way. Also something cool I remember discovering years ago was kind of regarding the famous race between the Supra and the Ferrari. The driver of the Ferrari is none other than producer Neil Moretz, and it's actually his personal vehicle. Craig Lieberman has told the story of how they once proposed Brian race a C5 Corvette, but he advised them for something maybe a little more exotic to better flex the Supra's big 2JZ muscles for a closer matchup. And then ironically, their producer, Neil, he volunteered his ride for the sequence and also squeezed himself in there for a cameo. So yeah, that kind of worked out for everybody, didn't it?
Someplace on the beach.
Hey, nice car. What's the retail on one of those?
More than you can afford, asshole. Ferrari. $255,000 all cash. One IPO, here we go.
Let's go.
Smoke 'em.
Another thing worth mentioning is that most, if not all, the extras you see in the races or at Race Wars were real car enthusiasts who responded to ads on the early days of the internet or just by word of mouth. Real cars and real people being represented, which is really, really cool, and Rob Cohen also expressed his appreciation for that authenticity. Talking more about the cars, this was the very first time I saw a lot of these imports besides the video games I played on my dad's PS2, like Gran Turismo and Test Drive. This is precisely where I fell in love with the Mitsubishi Eclipse, Toyota Supra, and this is also where I got a liking for these other vehicles too, such as like the Ford Lightning, RX-7, Leon's R33 GTR, Trans S2000 with 100 grand under the hood apparently, Jesse's Jetta, Letty's 240SX, Edwin's Integra, and of course Dom's black Charger with the massive blower. I think besides the Dukes of Hazzard, this was like the first time I remember seeing a Dodge Charger being like, wow, that's a cool car. Interesting enough, Craig Lieberman has the VIN numbers for a lot of the real cars they used along with their stunt variants and has made videos regarding their whereabouts after shooting the first film. Obviously some of them they rented for private owners like Craig and these other people, and they were returned to them after the first movie had wrapped. But then the ones that they built in-house for the stunts and stuff, they actually were kept in a warehouse, and a lot of them were actually repainted and repurposed for Too Fast, Too Furious. Like some of the Supras, the RX-7s, the S2000s, they were all repurposed for Too Fast, Too Furious, which I think is kind of cool. And now that we're kind of like in the latter half, kind of the closing parts of this video, I kind of just want to talk about some things I noticed or some like weird fun trivia or mistakes that maybe you've noticed too, or maybe you haven't, so let's talk about it.
Hey man, you know this is bullshit.
The scene with Vince playing guitar was actually real. Rob Cohen said both him and even Johnny Strong came from musical backgrounds before becoming actors. Now, something else I kind of thought was cool, Rob mentions how during the scene with Brian bringing the Supra on the hauler, they actually ran out of daylight and shot some of the scenes with Paul during the nighttime. Camera and lighting tricks were implemented to match the lighting achieved with the scenes of Vin in them, and it looks seamless. I had no idea they did this. This was pretty cool because it looks great. But something very interesting I noticed was that Paul Walker's dad is actually credited in the credits, Paul Walker III. He's credited in the production as the film's firearm consultant. I just thought that was really cool, and I don't ever see anybody talk about that. The scene drowning Ted in oil and Vince dangling from the semi both had to be retooled and recut due to the MPAA requiring it to keep a PG-13 rating. Both of those scenes were kind of deemed a little too extreme, and they would have earned an R rating.
We're working to try to earn our PG-13 rating, and although the MPA will not tell you what to do, they have indicated that the violence and blood factor on this truck is too intense for the rating. So Peter and I are working to keep the integrity of the sequence, but get that PG-13, because it's very important that the young end of the spectrum of the audience, those kids who cannot drive yet, who have a big desire to drive and learn about cars and speed and all the things that this picture's about, for them to be able to see the movie.
Here's another random note. Rob actually points out something in the director's commentary I never picked up on after several watches. That being Letty picking up her wad of cash while giving the guy in the RX-7 the finger. Something that Michelle Rodriguez did on her own and that cracked up Rob Cohen. Something else too, perhaps a mistake. We see Tran roll his window down to reveal himself racing Jesse, but just in a couple shots later there is a mistake. We first see him in a long sleeve shirt when he rolls his window down, and then just moments later he's only in a tank top. And of course we notice the non-existent brakes on the Jetta when they take off. This is just something, a couple things that are just really funny about this. Something else I thought was hilarious was the cut to the nighttime rave with the music at Race Wars after Dom and Tran have their little scuffle.
Turn up.
We can see a guy with a Razor scooter just hopping around back there. This really got a chuckle out of me. Another thing I'm willing to point out, this is the only time we see Dom truly get hurt in the entire franchise, which is powerful for the film's sake by showing that he's not invincible, despite the facade he holds, while the sequels do the opposite of this, which diminishes his character completely. This is the only movie where his obligatory white shirt actually gets dirty. Fight me. Like, his shirt gets pretty dirty in this one, and it hardly ever happens in the rest of them if I'm not mistaken. Speaking of the series regressing Dom's character, this film also does something special. It's the only film in the series that has true consequences. With that brings me to the fact that this movie had the guts to kill our beloved Jesse, and it stuck by it up to this point. It is sudden and it stings. Later in the franchise, we get a similar moment with Han that is masterful with this death that seems out of nowhere, but like other things, they later reversed it and ruined any gravity that Tokyo Drift and the other films barely had post the original one. I will never forgive them for Han's resurrection. F9 is a disgrace, and I will always stand by that. But that's another conversation for another time if y'all are interested. So in conclusion, the film has stakes and consequences. Certainly no happy ending with a barbecue. It had the balls to end with the chickens coming home to roost, like I mentioned before. Brian and Dom both facing the new realities of their choices. I will forever love that about this first film. I think really one of my only big nitpicks with the movie is just something kind of a little funny. No, it's not the goofy terminology or other small mistakes, it's the scene involving Jesse's death. I never once until now thought about why Jesse isn't bewildered or off-put by Brian and Dom holding each other at gunpoint and yelling at each other. Better yet, Jesse doesn't seem to notice the blood that is covering Dom's white t-shirt. I just found that oddly hilarious. It doesn't really make or break any of my immersion or make me love the film any less. It's just something small that I wonder was simply not noticed or considered. I mean, Jesse just doesn't seem fazed at all by what's going on. He doesn't ask any questions. Maybe there was more behind this, or maybe we aren't seeing like perhaps some deleted material in the script or on film to help explain this seemingly odd ignorance on Jesse's behalf. Like I said, he's really not aware of anything that's been going on, so I think it's funny that he just ignores that Brian and Dom are holding each other at gunpoint and there's blood all over Dom's shirt. He doesn't notice any of that, and then he just gets lit up, which is sad. And with everything said and everything you've watched, if you're still watching, it kind of brings me to one last kind of general thought about all of this. That's why I believe this film is aged better most and remains the best film of the series. It wasn't afraid to have fun, but it also took itself seriously while introducing stakes and grit that felt real. And what else felt real were the relationships shown on screen and the bonds formed by cars. This is truly one of my favorite films of all time, like I've mentioned time and time again. It could have ended here, no franchise, and still remained a classic, and it still is a classic. But the last thing, like I mentioned, the last thing I really want to explore is something Rob Cohen said about this first movie. He sees this movie as a western of sorts. He compares Dom to a prime gunslinger, the very best there is, yet he feels trapped by his own nature. And with that, we have Brian, who is taking the role of a fresh-faced gunslinger learning this lifestyle, both being immersed in it, although they are on two different sides of the spectrum. We see throughout the film that there are stark differences in presence, appearance, and skill between the two, and even when they grow their closest together, the magic is their contrast. I think this is a really interesting way to look at it, which is, I've never thought about this before, because why would you? By the time I was growing up, westerns had since faded out of cinema, and I really wasn't a big fan of them as a kid because they weren't really big in the cultural boom like they were for my parents and grandparents' generations. I grew up with the boom of like superheroes. You know, it's Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, the X-Men. But looking back, I think The Fast and Furious was my generation's Western in a sense, at least in a metaphorical sense. I bet nobody was expecting that comparison and that draw of being a Western, did you? And that's all my thoughts on The Fast and Furious. To state one more time, it's a movie that has shaped a lot of my youth and still has a spot on my plate as an adult. It's loud and energetic, and it's also quiet and reflective at the same time. I realize most people nowadays, and even back then, didn't care much for this movie, seeing nothing more than flash and noise, but I obviously don't think that this was the case for everybody. I mean, look at the love and the following that this has. This little film nobody believed in is the same one that birthed a multi-billion-dollar franchise with its own merchandise, amusement attractions, shoe collaborations, die-cast, all kinds of stuff. So with 2026 upon us, let's not forget the importance of what so many labored over to create the film that we now have to look back on and appreciate. So to Rob Cohen and the entire production, the entire crew, I want to say thank you for not only shaping my youth and who I am now as an adult, but giving us kind of not really an escape, but giving us a lifestyle film to enjoy and soak up. It's a timeless classic that touched me in ways most might never understand. For anyone else who has enjoyed themselves and maybe took something away from this, I want to thank you for being here, for making it this far. It means the world to me. I hope I've grabbed some of your attention and some of your respect. I'd love to grab even more of it with more content, maybe Fast and Furious related or Need for Speed or something like that. If you're interested, let me know. Comment, like, consider subscribing. I would love to have you. With that said, that is a look back 25 years later of the Fast and the Furious. This has been really fun. I know this is going to be a beast to edit because I'm running kind of long now. Hopefully the video won't be too bad. But yeah, I will see you guys next time. That's goodbye for now. Peace.
Thanks for coming on and thanks for being a part of the adventure, man. It has been a hell of a ride.